here tonight. We appreciate your participation and your interest in the education of our children. Let's begin with a land acknowledgement from Dr. Sweeting.
Good evening. We honor the first peoples of this land by acknowledging that the area in which we gather is within the traditional territory of the Stillaguamish tribe of Indians. The Stillaguamish people have inhabited these lands and waters since time immemorial, and their ancestors have remained in this territory to this day. The Stillaguamish people have continued to practice the traditional ways of their ancestors of fishing, hunting, and gathering. The Stillaguamish tribe has had these lands and cultural traditions passed on to them by their ancestors who believed that everything has a spirit and that they are caretakers of these lands and waters.
Thank you, Dr. Sweeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we call for those attending tonight, I'd like to welcome Debbie Montgomery. I don't know if we can see you. I haven't scrolled down yet, but Debbie's joining us with Julie and Margaret to keep all of us and this meeting right on track. So thank you and welcome, Debbie. And now, Madam Secretary, could I have roll call?
Yes, Director Kelly.
Here.
Director Levesque.
Here.
Director Ray. Director Ray. Director Rawson.
Director Ray's here.
Oh, thank you. Director Rawson.
I'm here. Became very unstable, but I think I'm good now.
Okay. Director Rawson.
Here.
And President Fay.
Here.
And Student Advisor Andrich.
Here.
And Superintendent Sweeting.
Here.
Thank you. And moving right on to approval of the agenda, may I have a motion? To approve the agenda.
I make a motion that we approve the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second that.
And Madam Secretary.
Director Kelly.
Aye.
Director Levesque.
Aye.
Director Ray.
Aye.
Director Rawson.
Aye.
President Fay.
Aye. And moving on, tonight we are officially welcoming Kyle Schroeder as our new student advisor. And Dr. Sweeting, could you please welcome him for us?
Yes, I will. Well, good evening again. Carl Schroeder is with us, and we want to make this official that he will officially join our board team for the next 2 years. And very excited about that. And I'm going to move right on and swear him in. And then after that, if he wants to say a few words, that's fine too. So Kyle, you have your paper in front of you, right?
I do.
Okay, and I'd like you to raise your right hand. Okay, you ready? So repeat after me. I, Kyle Schroeder, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States.
I, Kyle Schroeder, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington
and the provisions of the Charter and ordinances of Snohomish County
and the provisions of the Charter and ordinances of Snohomish County,
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform and discharge
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform and discharge
the duties of the Office of Student Advisor to the Board of Directors, Arlington Public Schools,
the duties of the Office of Student Advisor to the Board of Directors, Arlington Public Schools,
according to law, to the best of my ability.
according to law, to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Kyle. You're part of our team. We're so glad. Yay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. Yes, we're anxious, and you have a wonderful person here to help you. Maddie will will guide you. And any questions, just ask her because she's got a year under her belt on this. Kyle, would you like to say anything?
I think all I would like to say is thank all of you. I would like to thank all of you for the opportunity to be here, and I would like to say that I'm very excited to be able to go through with all of this and get this under my belt, and I look forward to working with all of you as a student advisor.
Thank you. All right, we're happy you're here. Next, we're going to do approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the regular Zoom meeting minutes from July 12th, 2021?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the Zoom meeting on July 12th, 2021.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. And Madam Secretary?
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Levesque,
Aye.
Director Ray,
Aye.
Director Rossin,
Aye.
President Fay.
Aye. Thank you. Moving right along, we're going to tonight have our public hearing for the 2021-2022 annual budget. And we're going to introduce Ms. Gina Zutenhorst, who will be providing a presentation and then answering questions from board members. After the board members' questions are answered, I will ask if there are any questions or comments from audience members. So, Ms. Zutenhorst, take it away. You have to unmute, darling.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Gina Zutenhorst, Executive Director of Financial Services, and I'm going to share my screen to have you be able to see my presentation about our budget, our proposed budget. Uh-oh, it's popping up on the other screen, the full screen version of it, but you can see the regular version here, right? I'm seeing if I can pull this over. I'm not sure why it's doing that.
You can just say run the slideshow from there and then hit swap.
Okay, well, I'm trying to get the full screen to show up.
If you
in
say
front
from current slide, Gina,
What?
and then there should be a thing that says swap view, and it'll swap what we see versus what you see.
Gina, just use from beginning.
Yes.
Click on that.
Yes, but what I'm saying is it's showing up on my other screen. I have two screens.
Oh,
The full screen's popping up on the right. So I will.
Should be a view swap.
Yeah.
That
View.
should not there under the one that's on full screen on your other slide where it's full screen. See if there's a menu there that says swap. This is fine. We can see it.
Okay, I'm gonna go forward and I'll figure that one out hopefully for another time.
I like this view the best, Gina. You should.
Okay, and you can see what's coming. So yes, I am here to share with you the proposed budget for 21-22. And whenever we're talking about budget, we always start first with the district mission. And our district mission is to educate, prepare, and inspire students to graduate and seek their full potential as lifelong learners. Our mission is further defined in our strategic plan. And budget falls under strategic plan goal 3. That's the one it's most closely aligned with, and that is resource stewardship, which says we will secure quality resources, people, time, money, and property, and align these resources to support equitable learning and achievement for students by making decisions using an equity lens and data. Now, there are 3 other subset goals within that strategic plan goal 3, and that is around maximizing student learning, maintaining, improving, and replacing buildings and equipment, and investing resources prudently. But I think, and I feel the board's been involved in this, probably agrees as well, that the most compelling articulation of what Arlington Public Schools is about is contained in these comprehensive values. And these were developed around the budget process and are contained in board policy. And there's a lot that it covers, and I'll highlight a few of them. The second bullet, especially, we will remain student-focused by using an equity lens and responding to areas of greatest need using data, research, and feedback. The third bullet about small class sizes. Hopping down here to where we talk about investing in appropriate internal controls over financial operations, but also compliance with a board policy for minimum fund balance and allowing for flexibility on that fund balance in times of emergency. So those are just some of the highlights, but these each value listed here is important and is contained in these values. So let's begin to review our proposed budget. So the F-195 is a document that's also attached here to the board plate in board docs, and it is almost 200 pages long and is very technical and very detailed. And so today what we present to you is the more of a summarized version of what is contained in that F-195. Now that format called the F-195 is what OSPI, Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, requires of school districts across the state. And they refer to it as the F-195. It includes 5 major funds. The first is the General Operating Fund. We have the Capital Projects Fund. I have a Debt Service Fund, an ASB Fund, and a Transportation Vehicle Fund. And those are all individual sets of accounts that are legally separate entities. Here's a quick slide that kind of talks about what each of those is for, what each fund is basically for. And we'll talk further about those specialized purposes as we go through each fund. But the biggest and most complex is the general fund. That is the one that covers the operating budget for day-to-day activities of the district. So here we go. The general fund, here's a high-level summary. Basically, this shows the budget for 21-22, what we're estimating, and it compares it to the budget from last year. You can see that we estimate we'll be coming in with a beginning fund balance of 11.6 million. We estimate expenditures will be, revenues will be about 85 million. Expenditures will be about 88.8 million. I've rounded up to shorten. We have a transfer to Transportation Vehicle Fund for 300,000, and that would land us at an ending fund balance of 7.5 million approximately. When we look at staff counts, this is what comes into our budget. Our staffing is level as compared to prior year. And our classified employees, we've actually, compared to prior year's budget, it shows a little bit less on the classified employees, but we have actually added staff compared to our current operating this year. So this isn't a reflection of a decrease so much as it's actually an increase, but we're comparing budget to budget. And then here we have our enrollment. And because we know where we ended for 2021, we can compare to actual here. So you'll see here a budget 2021. This is what we estimated we would have for enrollment in our 2021 budget. This is what we actually had for enrollment, 5,700 compared to 5,237. And so we're coming in pretty level for the 21-22 next year's budget for what we're estimating our enrollment will be at. And this is just simply based on what we estimated our enrollment would be, and through lots of involvement and talking back in February and March when we needed to, board approval happened in late February when we needed to get that point first to begin our estimates around. So this is what we had approved for enrollment at that time, and we still use that figure. Things will adjust as the real year happens and real students and real numbers come in. But this is what the budget that you have before you is based on. So some key points as we launch into showing some of the charts and pie charts about revenues and expenditures and fund balance. Some key points, we're coming in with a beginning fund balance of 11.6 million is what we estimate we're going to start with. And that is still a very healthy fund balance. It is over our minimum fund balance. And this is a leftover result of the initial influx of funds from the McCleary funding model change back in 2017-18 that resulted in a balloon to district fund balance. And it is consistent with the planned spend down of excess fund balance. 21-22 expenditures are going to be exceeding revenues as expected. Our ending fund balance for 21-22 is expected to be at the minimum. So we're coming in above, but we're going to end at our minimum fund balance for next year. Future year spending will need to be reduced by pretty significant amounts unless other factors change. If enrollment increases, it will really help lessen the need to reduce costs. That is a general big picture. Coming in higher fund balance, spending more than we're getting, ending with the targeted minimum fund balance. So what is included in this year's budget? These numbers are based on the salary increases of, now this is just estimated for the one group I'm about to mention because we are still working together with our teachers group. And so only for the purposes of estimating, we used salary increases of 2%, 2.5. So it's 2% plus 0.5. And then public school employees, our classified staff, they are at a 2.5. We know that one for sure because our agreement with them is set. And then we have 2% increase for AAA and directors. So the other things that are included in the budget is we're staying the course with investments that we've made in programs and classrooms with higher staffing levels. We have ESSER funding support for class size, reopening summer school, paraeducator hours, social emotional learning, equity, and COVID-related costs and impacts on operations. And then we are also still including a transfer of 300,000. The K stands for thousands for in finance speak, abbreviated. We're transferring that to transportation vehicle fund. Now in previous presentation in years, we had planned on that being in the 800,000 range, but we're trying to be cautious because we know we are facing potential reductions in future years. So we've ratcheted that back to 300,000, although the need in the transportation fund is very real, and we'll talk further about that as we get to that area. Also included in the F195 budget document, we have to talk about how much we are levying next fiscal year. So for our general fund levy, our education and operations levy, we will be in our second year of our capital levy. And we have authorization to levy 9.2 million. And for our capital fund levy, we have authorization to levy 6.149553 million. So let's dig into the details. General fund revenues. This is a pie chart graphic version of the percentage of what makes up our total revenues. Percentages breakdown of what type of revenue. So as you can see, the green and the orange, state general purpose, state special purpose, those make up 78% of our revenues. Local taxes, the blue, makes up 11% of our revenues. Local non-tax and other is a small little percentage. So local non-tax would be fines and fees or small donations. Federal dollars make up 9%, and that is the red pie chart piece. That is higher than in previous years. In previous years, it's been more like 2 or 3%. And so it's higher because of ESSER 2 funds, federal funding that has been put in support of schools. So we'll look at this in a numbers format as well. Here it is, this year's budget compared to last year's budget, those revenue categories. And you can see the increases and decreases compared to previous year. Our federal special purpose is up. That's the ESSER funds and other federal food program support. But our state general is down. That's due to lesser enrollment. And special purpose follows that. Those are mostly driven by enrollment in the state level. Ultimately, we're pretty level when you look down at this bottom line. We're pretty level on revenues, but normally I would expect with an enrollment decline, our overall would be lower because of less enrollment and also the decreasing regionalization factor. But the fact that we're not budgeting a large increase in enrollment, we're being bolstered by federal dollars here. Okay, so we're going to move forward to talk about expenditures. Here is the pie chart graphic, and this is a breakout of how the funds are spent. So for regular instruction, basic education, and which is the green, and ESSER, which is the light orange, that makes up about 58% of the budget. Support services in purple makes up about 17%. Special education instruction is about 15%. And some of these other programs, comprehensive and career and technical and other programs, other instructional programs, that makes up about 10%, all of these little pie chart pieces. Here's that in numbers form. And we are estimating to spend 1.8 million more than we did in the previous year. You can see a decrease in regular instruction is pretty much offset by the federal special ESSER 3 funding that we'll be estimating to be receiving. And here's another look at expenditures based on different categories of coding of these costs. This is by activity. Now, when you look at this, each activity or category below, it includes all the costs that are associated with that activity. We're talking about the materials, the supplies, the equipment, and any contractual services or subscriptions, software, professional development, in addition to salary and benefits. So it's not just the people. When you're looking at teaching and support, it's not just the people. When you're looking at school administration, it's not just the people or the principals, it's their registrars and fiscal secretaries and all of the paraeducators and all of that, and the supplies and the textbook, all of that stuff. So this is a picture of expenditures in those categories. And this is an increase. Largely, we have added additional paraeducator support, and we have added an additional nurse. And in addition, in central administration, that increase and other support activities, partially that is an increase in insurance, but it's also increased because of the support that we are putting in support of our equity wellness programs and our categorical programs, and the complexities around how we're utilizing those funds in support of the accelerated learning undertakings that the district is taking on in these next years. So here's another look at the expenditures broken out by object. So this is what are you spending it on? salaries and benefits, supplies and materials, purchase services, travel, capital outlay. And all of these are defined by the state, how the district is supposed to code and categorize its costs. So we have laid this out, and you can see where we're at with our spending. Now, employee benefits, normally you wouldn't see a decrease there, but in actuality, the amount that we are required, it's set by the state legislature for retirement. That percentage has decreased a tiny bit this year. So when you apply that all across our whole staff, it does actually generate an actual little bit less than in previous years. But also another thing that's slightly decreased compared to prior year is our Asb premium amount that we have to pay for the employee benefits through the state. The premium has decreased just slightly. Travel is an obvious reason why that has decreased. We're going to be doing more things by Zoom and remotely rather than going. And otherwise, it's mostly pretty normal. So this next slide is just materials, a representation of the materials, supplies, and other costs. The state, we abbreviate, call that MSOC. So it's materials, supplies, and other costs. And this just shows that in the overall state allocation that they provide for to MSOC needs for regular instruction, alternative learning, our dropout reengagement, and the district support, what we are budgeting to spend there is more than what the state provides. And now we're going to move into our 4-year budget summary. This is a multi-year working forecast. This is a relatively new requirement for school districts to include in their annual budgets, is a multi-year or a 4-year budget summary. And this is what it looks like for our school district. This is this next year's budget. We just got done talking in detail about, what makes up those revenues, what makes up those expenditures for our estimates and our ending fund balance. But then when we use that and project it out, our revenues and expenditures for the next coming years, and you'll note that I have used some gradual increases with the notion of being back to our pre-COVID level of enrollment in this 4th year. So not an overly aggressive return to normal numbers, but still a pretty decent quip for, we hope that they will be back for enrollment. And that enrollment is a number then that our revenues, a good deal of our revenues are based directly from that enrollment level. So we've projected those revenues, and we've also projected our expenditures based on 21-22's expenditures. So that assumes the same level of staffing and increased costs going forward. And thus, this is the picture that we get. Now, the not very good thing is this line that I've had to add here, based on the numbers that are coming. This shows a need for future reduction. So not next year. Next year will be down to our minimum fund balance if all goes exactly as is here, which would then beget the need for us to be planning for reductions for the 22-23 fiscal year. So I'm showing that here, that this is what that is generating for us. And I've put those numbers in red because our future projections of salary costs and future year revenues at these enrollment levels would not be sufficient to maintain level of staffing. I also will talk about our minimum fund balance. Our board policy is a wise business practice to set a minimum fund balance, and it is in our board policy to maintain a 1-month level of operating costs, 1 month's average operating costs. I'm sorry, this slide did not get updated because here's what the minimum fund balances would be right here: 7.4, 7.5, 7.6, and 7.8. And that is need to indicate caution because we would still need to have future year reductions in order to achieve those minimum fund balance targets. What could change the picture? There are many variables and assumptions that could change that picture. Enrollment uncertainty is a very great one, but also our regionalization is stepping down from 8. It was 18 2 years ago, 17 this year. It's going to be 16 for the new budget year and on down. Now, if the legislature does something different with that, that will help us. If they rebase that, it will help us. I would hope it wouldn't go the wrong way. I would hope it would go in the more positive way. But for now, what we do know is that regionalization is stepping down. Other variables affecting expenditures, the cost inflator of IPD. I can't remember what that stands for all of a sudden. Price index something for future years' salaries, plus any additional for AEA, our teachers group, with current year negotiations underway. So the demographics of staff experience could change over time. That could change our future year picture. And then just increased operating costs with reopening of the school after the closure due to COVID-19. Did my light come back on? There we go. Okay, so that is my last slide around general fund. So I will just pause for a moment before slipping into a discussion about our next funds to entertain any questions from our board or thoughts that you're having as I've gone. I know you've heard this multiple times, so I wouldn't blame you if you don't have any probing thoughts to give at this time. I'll go on. So we're talking
Gina,
about.
it's Mike Ray.
Yes, Mike.
Sorry, I'm slightly delayed here with some poor connectivity. Hey, so I know we've seen some information showing that, you know, we're kind of at least be careful in the next coming years in our budgetary process. I'm just curious to know, did you run any numbers or work with Dr. Sweeting on, you know, maybe some type of a percentage impact? If I'm not looking at the slide right in front of me, but it was between 4 and 5 million for the next couple of years. So, you know, maybe taking 20 or 25% of that and seeing if we could, you know, absorb that into this year's budget by, you know, maybe a reduction of $1 million-ish round. I mean, I know it's big money, right? But do you have any indicator, I guess, of where that would come from specifically? And would it be possible to do something like that in this year's budget to help lessen the impact for the future year's budgets?
You know, that is would have been a discussion and a discussion for previous months where we would be able to potentially build those kinds of things in. But given the uncertainty of our enrollment, you know, given that we've landed pretty level with our enrollment, we considered but decided that that was not the path that we would go this year. We really wanted to stay true to the commitments that we had already made, especially with staffing, and that making up 86% of our overall budget. Reductions would need to come in the form of materials, supplies, and other costs. And with needing to be using our ESSER funds and needing to infuse the classroom with some things that they may not have had in the past, it was not a time to be trying to reduce, especially given that we did have and do have fund balance. So with a conservative enrollment and a high fund balance, it was something we did consider, but decided not to move towards as far as making reductions in this year. And I will say that in 2021, we did have some key places at times where we did have to reduce spending. So in essence, we already did some of that work during the COVID closure time, if you will, to really analyze if a position was vacated, do we have to refill that right now? Is that something that we need to do? And also just with reductions that were made, not to relive those times. They were hard times and they are still hard, but we had to reduce hours for some of our classified staff in 2021. So, and that was before we knew we would have stabilization funding, and other ESSER funds for real had not materialized. So I would say we probably already did that work of reducing to help us for future years. So.
Gina, also before you leave, the slide that shows the $5 million and 4.7 and $4 million shortfall. So if we don't do anything and everything comes to fruition as you predicted, we will be below our board stated policy for minimum fund balance, but we will not be broke. We will be
Not until 23, 24.
We will be dipping into our 1 month of rainy day funds at that point.
Yes, we would be negative in 23, 24.
Keep in mind, though, that this is a scenario without some of the commitments that we are negotiating right now. So this is not the exact picture of where we will land for this year.
And a 5,000 some reduction in this year will already affect a 5,000 reduction the next year to some extent, because these are projections carrying forward.
And this is based off of enrollment not coming back to 5,600, which is where we left it pre-COVID,
right?
But only coming back at a 50% of where we were.
Close to, yeah, about little under half.
Little under half of where we were. So to the extent that the 5,600 that we had pre-COVID come back, then this picture would change.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Gina, this is Mary. I have a question. If you could go back to slide 20 and talk to me a little bit more about supplies and materials. It looked like the percentage that materials were going up was like 18%, and I wanted to know what all that includes. The supplies and materials up 18%. And then I also wanted to ask you if you could explain the federal ESSER 2 funds and if there's an opportunity to get that again, or is this a 1 year only thing, and just kind of how that process works and what we can expect with that. Thank you.
Okay. So really would want to look at these two in combination, supplies and materials and purchase services. They've both gone up. That would be probably a lot of purchases of Chromebooks, and I'd have to analyze that further, but there's so many departments that are building into that. Everything that utilities are here in purchase services. So can't tell you exactly what that's made up of, but this is the increase over prior year, 748 or 530.
And then can you also explain ESSER 2 funds?
Sure. ESSER 3 is what we're budgeting for this year.
What's the difference between ESSER 1, 2, and 3?
ESSER 1 is CARES money. That was in the $400,000 range is what we were allowed. That came to us during the 1920 school year. That was used entirely for Chromebooks. And then ESSER 2 funds we will be getting some of those in 2021 this year. That's about 1.6 million. I'm saying this off the top of my head. I know we have expended about 300,000 of that right already for Chromebooks, and some of that will go towards staffing in this current year, but also for summer school and technology staff as well, that we hired additional staff on for dissemination of Chromebooks during that time and during these times. ESSER 3 is another allocation by the legislature, and there's different federal legislation over each of those, but the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 are pretty much they've all been for the same purpose pretty much. And so ESSER 3, we do plan to spend ESSER 2 funds completely in 2021 and claim those. So that's part of our positive fund balance coming into 21-22, is being able to access all of our ESSER 2 funds. ESSER 3 funds we will be using in 21-22, and that's about 3.3 or 3.5 million. I'm saying that off the top of my head. And that we are using for increased staffing, where we are adding paraeducator hours at all of our elementaries. We are adding a nurse. We are adding a campus, an additional campus monitor for the Arlington High School. We're adding an increased instructional staff. An example of that is at Weston High School, a 0.5 FTE for a fine arts teacher, and again, paying for summer school. So those are some of the things that I'm just remembering off the top of my head that our ESSER 3 funds are going towards. I don't expect those to continue. And if we use them all as planned, they will be fully expended after the 21-22 school year. If we don't spend them all, we can still access those funds in 22-23 before they would expire. If you do not spend them and claim them within the time frame that has been allotted, you don't get them. You must spend to get. And that is all administered directly through OSPI, and we have to do grant claims in order to get those through OSPI's grant administration software that they administer for all school districts. How's that?
That's a great explanation. Thank you, Gina.
Okay. Anything else before I go into ASB? Hey, here's ASB, and here's the flight and the creativity exhibited, that they were able to still do a great show. And here's a picture of that and the lights. Our ASB fund. These funds support student activities and athletics. The revenues come primarily from student body fees, activity gate receipts, fundraising, and donations. And a very important premise of ASB funds is that they are student governed. Students are involved in the design of the budget, and student approval is required for the use of ASB funds. And they're not supposed to be used for curriculum. It's supposed to be things of a cultural, athletic, recreational, or social nature. Our debt service fund is used to manage the debt that we have. We pay our principal and interest through the debt service fund. And the only thing that's left in this fund is our non-voted debt that we'll be servicing through this. So, and we make transfers in order to make those payments. So you'll see that we are budgeting revenues, which would mostly just be a little bit of interest, and transfers in. Those transfers are coming from the Transportation Vehicle Fund, $116,000. That's to service the debt that we issued back in 2017-18 to buy about 10 more buses. Those were financed in that method. And $2.2 million will come transferred in to debt service, comes from the capital projects for payment on the financing of our capital levy projects that were done via the non-voted bond debt that was done June 2020. Our Capital Projects Fund, this administers the long-term school construction and repair needs. And very important, the resources that come in here legally, they cannot be spent on school operations. So if we have funds in the Capital Projects Fund, we can't reach over there and use those funds to provide money to pay salaries in our general fund. And here is a summary for our capital projects. The main source of revenue is from capital levy taxes. Thank you to our voters and thank you to all who are involved in helping with that initiative. The expenditures are for projects as described in the capital levy, the classroom additions, floor coverings, safety and security improvements, locks, cameras, and more secure access. And we were lucky to hear from Brian in our last board meeting talking about the status of all of those projects underway and going forward with those. This budget provides the budget capacity to actually do that work. And then, of course, I have the transfer out to debt service fund included here, included in this 13.8 million. 2.2 million of that is to make interest and principal payment for non-voted debt. The principal, the interest on that does not come from levy proceeds. It comes from other sources within the Capital Projects Fund. Transportation Vehicle Fund. This is the fund we use to buy buses. We're legally required to segregate those purchases into the Transportation Vehicle Fund. So here's a summary. The main sources of revenue for this fund are the state funds that come off of the depreciation schedule. So we have all our buses on an inventory with the state. They know about all those buses. They know how old they are, and they provide us an amount of funds each year based on where the bus is at on that depreciation schedule, with the idea that that's going to provide funds to replace that bus in the future. We have $300,000 from the general fund transferring in to help in getting caught up on replacing buses in the aging fleet because the depreciation schedule isn't sufficient to keep up with what our actual needs are. And the expenditure capacity is to support purchase of additional buses, but also includes make sure we're keeping up with our debt schedule to pay back the debt to the debt service fund so that they can make that principal and interest payment on that original non-voted bond debt of 1.2 million back when we're paying it down. It was done back in 2017-18. So that's all of the funds. I'm going to switch over into what the budget process timeline is going forward, and that will be the end of our public hearing. Last chance for questions before we turn it over to anybody in the public that would like to also have a thought or a question. The budget process timeline today is August 9. This is our board meeting. Following this in a different part of in the regular business part, we will entertain a budget resolution. We'll propose that for your adoption of the 4-year budget summary and the 4-year enrollment projection, and it'll be proposed for adoption. And per RCW, the budget has to be adopted by August 31st. And then once it's adopted, we submit that to the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and they also process it and approve it. Are there any other questions?
If there are no other questions from the board, I'm going to go ahead then and ask, are there any questions or comments from audience members regarding the 2021-2022 annual budget? I'm going to ask that again. Are there any questions or comments from audience members? And last and final time, any questions or comments?
Okay.
Yes.
We have a couple of audience members with their hand up.
Thank you.
And the first one is Joe Angelo. And if you could please give us your email address, and I will allow you to speak. Joe, can you hear us?
Yeah, I've given Julie my email address before,
Okay.
but I thought this was for the comment period.
Oh, okay.
This is just for the budget hearing at this point, and then we'll be doing general audience comments right after this.
Okay.
Is your comment more general?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll wait.
I'm going to go ahead and ask again then for
We
the
have-
last.
We do have one more.
Wait.
Okay, great.
And Jennifer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm waiting for the general comment section.
You are also
to-
waiting for general.
I
Okay.
should have lowered the hand. Sorry about that.
Nope, that's okay.
All right, this is my last time asking that. Are there any questions or comments from audience members regarding the 2021-2022 annual budget? Since there are no further questions, I declare the public hearing closed. And tonight under new business, we'll be approving or voting on that.
When is that way anyways?
All right. With that, thank you, Gina. I wanted to say thank you so much. You've done an amazing job of consistently keeping us current. And just for audience people that might not know, the reason there are so few questions is because Gina comes to us once a month and gives us an update on all of this. So she is the one that has taught me personally how to understand budget. Thank you very much, Gina Zutenhorst. Okay, moving on then. The next part of our agenda is comments from the audience. And yes, I can tell that we have people that are ready to speak. So before we do that, I'm going to read the script for audience participation. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of involving members of the public at our meetings, and has therefore set aside a time at regular meetings to hear audience comments. You may speak about an agenda item or non-agenda topic. This is the only time during the meeting where public comment will be taken. Please listen carefully to these instructions. If you wish to speak to the board during this comment time, please click the raise hand button on the bottom bar in the Zoom window now and leave it raised until called. If you are joined by telephone, press *9 to raise your hand. We will first call on those who pre-registered to speak. After that, we will call on any other raised hands. Each speaker will be given one opportunity to speak. When your name is called, you'll be temporarily unmuted by the clerk. Please clearly state your name, spelling the last name, and email address, unless you've already provided your contact information to the clerk. And keep your comments as brief as possible, 3 minutes or less. The president may interrupt or terminate an individual's statement if it is uncivil or exceeds the allotted time. The board does not respond to questions during the business meeting. The board's silence does not signal agreement or endorsement of the speaker's remarks. If you are requesting a response or just prefer to provide comments to the board in writing, please do so through the district website at asd.wednet.edu. Choose administration, school board, contact the board. All right. Not sure who's in charge. Julie, is it you or whoever's in charge? Let's begin with audience participation. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone who would like to address the board?
Yes, first we have Jennifer Johnson, and we have her contact information, and she is here tonight to talk about masks. Jennifer, you should be able to go ahead.
Hello. Hi. I'm calling in the school board meeting as an advocate for my child. My children were both impacted like all the other kids were last school year during COVID. And I'm calling in particular regarding the mask mandate. I do not agree with having our kids wear masks. They wore masks all last school year, during the summer, in daycare during summer sports, and I 100% do not agree with the wearing of masks. I believe they're dirty, they spread diseases, and they are not suitable for children, especially my 5-year-old who was a kindergartner who sometimes would come home with dirt on her mask as she would go outside and touch her mask with her hands. And now has dirt on her hands, or she could have food and now it's transferred onto her mask. She's wearing that all day. She's breathing that in. She's only 5, and the mask protocol is not appropriate for 5-year-olds. If you're truly following the mask guidance, you need to wear surgical masks. It says on the homemade fabric, or not homemade, the fabric mask that you buy in the store specifically says does not prevent the spread of COVID. So to continue to wear these types of masks is completely laughable. So then also, not only do they need to be wearing the surgical masks, but there's a protocol for masks. If you follow the CDC guidance, it says you need to wash your hands before you touch your mask. Then when you remove your mask, you need to put it in a sanitized place, not on a surface like a desk, maybe like in a paper bag, something that's sanitized. And before you put it back on your face, you need to sanitize, wash your hands again before you put it on. My 5-year-old and my 8-year-old last year did not follow these guidelines. And I was told by the school that they would be provided a paper bag every day to put their mask in when they're eating, which they were not. These masks are unclean. The protocol is so sloppy. There's no point in wearing them. There were no big outbreaks. And when for children, the submission between, or the spreading of COVID is proven through the science to be low, and people that are asymptomatic are low spreaders of COVID. So to continue following these guidelines is completely ridiculous. They need to be looked at from a point of common sense, and not from what the state says, not from what the governor says, but from a health standpoint, and go back and forth with the guidelines and see how the masks are inappropriate to the kids to continue wearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, for taking the time to come tonight and
Thank
sharing
you.
your thoughts. And Madam Secretary, do we have another person?
Yes, we do. Next, we have Erica Knapp. And Erica Knapp is here tonight to talk about safe opening of schools and student support. Erica?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening tonight. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, well, what Julie said. So we're now 18 months into the pandemic, and I know that we have all learned so much from all the experiences that COVID has brought. And I know that parents, students, and staff, we're all just looking for safety and joy for all of us. And we had hoped to have been a more healthy community by now, but instead, just this week, just today, seeing the latest COVID numbers, and it's affecting kids more than it has ever before. I called in earlier this year, and I was asking for consideration of students with medical concerns. I have a child that has severe asthma, and I wanted to really just thank the board and the school district for holding strong in following the federal and state and local health guidance when it came to keeping our students safe and healthy. And for student support, I would like to ask for a few things. Because of medical concerns, many of the parents have been forced to enroll in different school districts that have more supportive online learning. I was looking around, specifically, we were looking at the Edmond School District online, and I definitely feel like our kids need more options for connections with teachers and peers online when they can't attend school. Because of the COVID pandemic, there are many students and families and teachers that have serious health concerns. And even with these COVID guidelines in place, it's still just too much to ask for them to risk their health. So I'm just asking for maybe some consideration for a more comprehensive and interactive online learning option to give optimal support for the students, families, and staff who have those serious health concerns. And I really thank you for everything you do.
Erica, thank you for coming. It's so wonderful when people give suggestions. So thank you for your suggestions. And do we have anyone else with a hand raised for public comment?
Yes, we do. Next, we have Joy Johnson, and Joy would like to speak about online student instruction options. Joy, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Joy Johnson, and I'm here to request that the district continue the CDL, Continuous Distance Learning Program, for the upcoming school year. Due to extreme medical risk and vulnerability in the COVID-19 pandemic, my daughter Jessica is unable to attend in-person school. We have a rare genetic immunodeficiency where we don't make antibodies. Jessica is not as bad as I am yet. I have to infuse donor antibodies known as immunoglobulin that's derived from donor plasma every week. My daughter did very well with fully virtual CDL last year for 4th grade. She had an amazing teacher, Miss Cameron, who created a close classroom community with the kids in a fully virtual environment where my daughter actually thrived. My daughter should have been going into 5th grade at Eagle Creek Elementary School in person this year, but unfortunately she's unable to. I was recently tested for antibodies by my immunologist. I still have no antibody protection by vaccine or by infusions. My immunologist and the Immune Deficiency Foundation tell us they expect a vaccine for children my daughter's age before the end of the year, but not before school starts. My very social child would not do well with AOP, Arlington Online Program, which is the only online option we're given currently, where they have contact with a teacher only once a week. AOP is not an equitable accommodation for our medical disabilities. Therefore, we are seeking a district transfer so she can attend Washington virtual academies. Last year, we stayed with Arlington, so our tax dollars would stay with Arlington, and so that Jessica could still have a sense of community with local teachers and classmates. If we had the option to do CDL this year with daily instruction like we did last year, we would stay in the district. Students like Jessica and other medically vulnerable families deserve a better alternative for virtual education during this pandemic while we remain at risk. I know from listening to board meetings that enrollment is way down last year. It's currently going to go down even further because you aren't adequately accommodating families like ours. Please keep our tax dollars in the district and continue CDL for the 2021-22 school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you for coming. And Madam Secretary?
Okay, next we have Joe Angelo. And Joe, you should be able to speak now.
Hi, thank you. As she said, my name is Joe Angulo. At a recent meeting, someone asked the Arlington School Board to adopt what was touted as a ban on critical race theory, as they had seen done by the Chehalis School Board. I wanted to speak up because the Chehalis School Board seems to have been misinformed into this decision, and I wish to make sure that the Arlington School Board does not follow suit. The Chehalis School Board statement says, and I quote here, "We will not teach Chehalis students that people due to their race or background are inherently good or bad, guilty or innocent, more or less capable than others." This seems reasonable, but it has nothing to do with critical race theory. Critical race theory is a topic being studied by legal scholars and college students to examine how the US justice system and laws have disadvantaged people along lines of race, gender, and/or class for most of the history of our country. Even though CRT isn't being taught in any K through 12 setting that I have heard of, a host of conspiracy theories about student indoctrination are being called CRT. These horror stories of white children being taught they are worse than colored children are now seemingly the rallying cry of the uninformed to convince school boards into whitewashing the curriculum of public schools. I hope that the Arlington School Board shows more wisdom than your counterparts in Chehalis and stays focused on real issues in our district that need to be addressed, such as figuring out how to replace some of our older schools, such as Post, and continuing to work on making sure that our students can have access to a safe education, even if that means adhering to and enforcing mask mandates. I am also concerned about the fact that infection rates in Snohomish County and most of the state are all trending back up, and that the Delta variant is infecting young people at an alarmingly higher rate than the previous strains of COVID. With this in mind, I also sincerely hope that the board will revisit the possibility of expanding distance learning options and possibly even a return to A and B days for elementary and middle schools, which are attended by students too young to be vaccinated. Thank you for your time, and I hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for coming, and I hope you have a good evening too. Thank you. And do we have another hand raised?
Yes, we do. Aaron Ray, if you could please give us your email address and then go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, this is Aaron Ray. Email address is
We lost you. We lost you, Aaron.
We lost you for a little bit there.
oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Good. So thank you guys for taking the time out to walk through this budget. It doesn't seem like we've talked too much about budget since the budget conversation ended, but I appreciate the line by line walkthrough. And I know that there's a ton more that goes into that. So thank you for that. And then again, with another hard decision on masks and everything like that, we've got to do what we need to do to keep our kids safe. I've got a child who, even when a vaccine is available for her, may not be able to take that. And so she really is dependent on, everyone else around her doing what is the common sense thing and getting vaccinated and wearing masks pretty much anywhere now. So thank you for sticking with that. And I just want to say that we appreciate your hard work in that.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for the positiveness. We appreciate it. Okay, any other hands raised?
Okay, I do not see any more. Let me scroll up and down, just to make sure. No more hands are raised.
All right, thank you. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do any board members have questions or comments about the consent agenda? If not, then may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
A motion to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Thank you. It's been motioned and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Madam Secretary, call for roll call.
Director Kelly?
Aye.
Director Levesque?
Aye.
Director Ray? Director Ray?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Director Ray is an aye.
Okay. Director Austin?
Aye.
President Fay?
Aye, thank you. Now we'll move directly into the new business for tonight. And the first item is academic and student well-being update and planning for the 2021-2022 school year. And Dr. Sweeting, please address that.
Yes, and before I move on to that, I would like to introduce Carrie Helgeson. You just approved the consent agenda, and Carrie is been now approved as our new Director of Equity and Student Wellbeing. And so I know she's on, and not a panelist, but I know she's there. And I just wanted to make note of that. We went through a long process this summer, and it was very comprehensive and include many stakeholders in that. So just wanted to make note that she's with us tonight, and we're excited that she is. So with that, I'm going to find my PowerPoint and get it started for us. So talking about the academic and student well-being plan update, and then planning for the opening of schools. And so I'm going to, all of this that we're talking about is like moving towards the reopening of our schools and getting back to school. So I'm going to share some of the information that actually keeps evolving from minute to minute. And so we just have to pay attention to that. As you heard from a few people tonight, the numbers have gone up. So we do pay attention to the Snohomish County COVID rates. We have been watching this all along since we have been in this challenge. And so, yes, they went up. And this is the most recent graph of those numbers. And this is what they're calling the fifth wave. If you were to go on to the Snohomish County site, you would see these things mentioned, that the case rates and hospitalizations have increased greatly in the last few weeks, and that the case rate for the two-period time during since July 31st, there's a 2-week period that they had tripled what had been a 5 weeks ago, and the number of hospitalizations has tripled. So Dr. Spitters, who is the Snohomish Health Officer who the superintendents connect with on a regular basis, he says himself, this is not sustainable and it's preventable. And so he mentions here the number of cases to date and the hospitalizations and the deaths. And he just says we have the means to prevent this. And the good news is within our own, on our campus in the school setting, we have been successful in that with the protocols that we've had in place during this last year. Even though they were uncomfortable and we didn't like them, they did serve a purpose. So recently, this was in July, and also I'm sure there's more to come. There was updated information from the Department of Health. And there's links here for those of you that want to go and connect to it. But I'm going to try to explain some of the changes that are in the works so that as we plan for the fall, what we must do. And there's things that we will do just because they're the right thing to do, but there are things that we have no choice in doing. So first of all, I want to celebrate that there are things that we're eliminating. So yes, there might be things that we are continuing to do, but we do not, I mean, unless they tell me differently tomorrow, but at this moment, the guidelines, we don't have to do daily testing to the questions like that every parent has had to do and every staff member has had to do all last year. That's gone. We do not have to do temperature checks. And the only time I guess you do that is if you don't feel good and you go to the nurse's room or isolation room and you got to take your temperature. We don't have to do those. Those are not required. Also, a change, which is in the guidance right now, masking outside. So students can go outside to recess at this moment and not wear masks. That's a celebration. I mean, we're moving in the right direction, and we're not cohorting, although I've heard tonight from public comment that would be, a welcome thing for some. For others, it's a welcome to come back to school 5 days a week. In the survey that we gave to parents at the end of the school year, that was it was a loud and clear return to school 5 days a week, but safely. Of course, this whole slide is just, it doesn't matter where you're at, what our protocols are, you need to stay home, staff and students, but you do not feel well. And so these are just those same guidelines, stay home when you are not well. The revised guidance from the July talks about the physical distancing with students, and this is a change. So instead of we have the 3 feet of distance between students, which in the past it had been 6 feet. So maintain physical distance of 3 feet or more between students in the classroom to the degree possible and reasonable. So those are new terms that are added to this, to the degree possible and reasonable. In a recent meeting with the state superintendent, he said we need to remove the barriers of bringing kids back to school, but we also want to make sure students are safe and staff. For students, to maximize distance between the students to the degree possible for the following situations. For all students when a mask can't be worn, so like at lunch, create situations, plan situations where there's much space as possible. So at elementary school, some students in the classroom, some in the common eating areas, but just have some plans for that at the high schools, at the middle schools. Where can we maximize the use of space to put space in between? Because when you eat, you can't wear your mask. It also talks about the classes such as PE or singing or playing instruments, to the degree possible, move these outdoors and make sure that the spaces are ventilated where possible. And basically the new guidance doesn't define the distance other than 3 feet or more between students to the degree possible and reasonable. So that's kind of new. The next one for adults. So this is where it gets complicated. So when you're trying to think about what are the guidelines or the requirements, there still is for adults, because we also have the labor and industry that mandates things and gives us recommendations, but also requirements. And so while physical distancing is no longer required as a primary control, there is still this effort to have this physical distancing between the adults, or having some kind of barriers. And so, and you noticed here, there's this long list. So we're among that list. So K-12 schools are among that list where you are to work and plan for that 6 feet of distancing as much as you can. Close contacts. So there's a lot of words here, but the bottom line is that for a K-12 setting indoors, the close contact for between student is the less than 3 feet away if a student becomes ill. And there's some guidelines here about, were they wearing facial coverings, or were they following the proper hygiene protocols? But this is an exception. There's an exception for staff, because adults, it's still 6 feet. And there's still this guideline for more than 15 minutes within a 24-hour period. So like if a student's passing by another student, or an adult's passing by another adult, and it's moments, it's not more than 15 minutes, then they're not considered a close contact. Facial coverings indoors. So in the K-12 setting, and this is not an Arlington Public Schools mandate. This is a legal requirement by the state. And it's not something that myself as the superintendent dictate, because I took an oath, just like I did with Kyle, our new student advisor today, that follow the laws of the state of Washington. I did that when I became superintendent, to the best that I can. And so it says here that adults, students in a K-12 setting will wear facial coverings, or an alternative if they can't. And there are some medical situations where that is true. And that's regardless of our vaccination status. It talks about that fully vaccinated staff must wear facial coverings indoors if students under the age of 18 are present. But if there aren't going to be any students in the presence, like let's say the teachers were going to have a professional development on a day where there's no students, that is a different rule. So it's when students are present. Notice the words in purple. This condition will not apply to board meetings, because it's either planned or a strong likelihood that there would be the presence of students. And this is where I'll remind the board that we, as a board, had said that we would return to in-person board meetings in September. So there's another board item that changes our regular board meetings to the BPAC, the Performing Arts Center, so that we can have that physical distancing applied there. And because students will be there, or the potential is there, we will wear masks during that time. Outdoors, not required, regardless of our vaccination status. They're strongly, though, recommended if you're for those that aren't vaccinated, if you're going to be in a real crowded space. And that means crowded with if you couldn't maintain 6 feet of distance from one another if you're adults. Vaccinations, the new guidance says that if you're fully vaccinated, either as a student or staff, and you don't have symptoms, you do not have to quarantine if you're exposed. So that will lessen time out of school if that happens. We are working through a process of what will we do as a system to verify vaccinations, because this is confidential information, and it's information that we would only use for close contact information. So we're working on that. And because there's always a potential, even if there's a staff professional development day with no students planned to be there, there's always a possibility that a student could come, just like here at the district office. So you would always carry a mask with you at all times so that you could wear the mask. Other actions that the revised guidance talks about, we're going to continue the care rooms, which are if someone comes to school and they are symptomatic. So we have an isolation place for them. We call it a care room. Ventilation, we are using all that we can to ventilate. We have air filtration systems that are to the highest density that they can be. So we are using that and continuing to evaluate that. We are cleaning and disinfecting, but during the day, soap is adequate. But then when we need to disinfect at a stronger level, we're going to do that when students are not present. Keep the hand washing and covering your mouth when you cough, and all those things that we should always be doing, always, no matter what kind of world we're in. And we are still required to report our cases and outbreaks to the local health department. And we will continue the process of having visitors or staff that go from building to building to sign in. At our schools, we have the system called Safe Visitor, and that's easy. You just go in and it's all set up. But for buildings like the district office or support services or transportation, we just have to use the paper log. But the purpose of that is just in case there's a need for contact tracing. So all of this is planning for the fall. And the good news is fall is coming and we have options. So we're planning for 5 days of full-time in-person instruction. We are keeping our online option available for K-12. And I want to say that I heard the need for that connection with each other. And I spoke to a parent this week about that as well. The AOP program, which I think has really increased and is wonderful. We heard a lot from the teachers last year about the things that they're doing, but they are adding at least, I know for sure they're adding a Zoom class meeting for AOP weekly. I know that they're gonna, after my call with the parent this week, if there's more that we can do to increase that connection, we will do it. But I know that we have agreed that there would be a weekly class meeting on Zoom so they could connect with each other, make some connections and have social interaction between the teacher and the students and each other. So that's a good thing. But also I know that people have mentioned the committed distance learning, and we continue to look at that, and there's challenges with the numbers there, but we will keep an open mind on that. So thank you for the comments tonight during the public comments. We are reviewing the Department of Health recent and ongoing adjustments to their requirements. It's like it's evolving all the time, and we're listening to that and making adjustments. And we're also reviewing our staffing needs and resource needs, material needs for additional support for social emotional learning, behavior support, and academic support. We have added staff to support this. And we've actually added curriculum in the social emotional, or it's in the works to add social emotional learning curriculum to support that as well. So that's planning for the fall. What questions does the board have, or what thoughts?
Dr. Sweeting, do you have a timeline when you would let our parents know if what we had last year in terms of AOP, if that is something that you and your staff are able to commit to, when would you be able to let parents know about that? What would be like the last date that you think?
Well, I know that I can tell you today that they're going to have the one class meeting on Zoom. That's that's happening.
Okay.
The CDL, if you're asking me about CDL, right now we're not planning to have that.
Right.
It requires, the idea of maybe doing a multi-age, we thought, well, can you do like a K1, 1, 2, 3, 4? At this moment, we don't have that I'm aware of the numbers or even the staffing for that.
Yeah.
But we'll keep thinking about it. So of course, people need to make decisions now.
Right.
But what I will say is that it would be great to enhance our own online program. And I know that I've heard of one next door that they're doing some Zoom meetings as well with theirs. So we're going to check that out, to see if we can learn from that and see if we can enhance ours more. So
now, can you explain? I totally hear what you're saying, and I know we've received different emails from constituents saying my child is immunocompromised. I really can't put them in the classroom. So I know we're hearing that from some of our parents, and I also know on the district side, it's more of an issue of, do we have the funding to support that? Do we have enough students to make that offering? So I know you're assessing that on a regular basis. My other question was, can you explain to me what you're describing? Because I'm just not familiar. What is this weekly Zoom meeting? So is that for students that are staying home and doing K-12, but they're still tied to a class? What exactly is that?
Well, I haven't, like Carrie Marsh, who's the principal of SPLC, and Carrie Henderson Burke, they have been brainstorming this, but this is what I imagine. So when you sign up for online classes, they're individualized. So each student picks their classes. But to have connection with those teachers and to have connection with the students, regardless of what classes, it's a time that they would come together. And I don't know if they do like team building or if they talk about their assignments, but it physically is a time on Zoom, like a class meeting, like an advisory to come together. So it's a connection, but it's not like a Zoom for their particular class, what we're thinking about.
Okay, that clarifies. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Sweeney, do we know where we are on attendance at this point? Like how close are we to people coming back?
No, we've been accepting kindergarten registration and registrations, and they seem to be just kind of steady coming in, but there's not a wave, there's not a wave like many coming back. And there's a few that, because they're concerned about having to wear masks, they're looking for other options. And that's one challenge that we'll have, because that's a legal requirement that we have as a system. But we can, outside of that, we can try to look at our programs to make them, as robust as we can, for online.
And do we know how many people are signing up for AOP?
Well, and I might need to ask Carrie Henderson Burke, I see her as a panelist, but I know that we ended the year with the registrations for the fall with a lot. I think our first grade class is very full for the online. And so they have not diminished. Let's put it this way. If anything, they have increased.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question too? I appreciate all of the safeguards and the precautions, and I fully support masking all the children. I work at a hospital. Things are really dicey right now for healthcare workers, and the patient load is incredibly, it's dire right now. I wanted to suggest outdoor classrooms. I know we have some teachers that are like, they have like an outdoor classroom sort of thing. Do we have anything in the works to increase more outside time, outside learning, outdoor classrooms, that type of thing for, ventilation and fresh air and mask breaks?
Mhm. No, definitely. We're talking about it. They will maximize that to the degree, but when weather starts getting crazy, we have talked about, and we do have a time with the administrators Wednesday and Thursday this week to kind of finalize some things we've talked about. Should we set up tents outside where there could be class? It wouldn't be all the classes, but it would be an option. So yes, they've talked about that. And I was trying to find my notes, but Brian Lewis isn't with us tonight, but he did share with me that our ventilation systems, based on some standards that are important, we exchange our air in our classrooms or the spaces every 15 minutes. So we've got it set up so there's often the airflow is exchanged. And then we have these dense filters that do a pretty good job of filtering out the air. But yes, ventilation is important. Being outdoors is great, like as much as we can. And I know that schools, the staff are talking about how can they do that. And like eating lunch, we're going to maximize eating outside, having a tent outside, that'd be awesome because they can spread out. Other thing at Arlington High School, I believe they're going to continue the eating in cars, individual cars. The students can do that. They loved it. And so thanks, Mary.
Chris, could you or Krista tell us how the vaccination rates are going in Snohomish County?
Krista, you're shaking your head. So
I think I can answer that question. We are just under in Snohomish County 70%. And so it's higher than other counties in Washington State. They really do okay down the I-5 corridor on vaccination rates, but not quite where we want them to be yet. So explaining why with those increased numbers and vaccination rates, why masks right now again are so very, very important.
Are we planning, thank you, Krista. Are we also planning on setting up any vaccination stations for our students, middle school and high school?
Well, Krista, I know that we as a system, we are disseminating information, letting people know where they can get vaccinated. We are not pressuring people, to do that. It's important that people make this choice, but we certainly want them to have the information so they could make that choice. So at this time, we're still having conversation about that, right, Krista? We just go ahead.
Yes.
Share.
So earlier this year, we did set some up that we talked about with the board that we were going to host a vaccine clinic. And at that point, I think the families that were wanting their students that are 12 years old and older, 12 to 18, had really already taken advantage of that. So we had very few students sign up, 4 to be exact. And so the pharmacy canceled that event, but we did ask that pharmacy, and I've been in conversation with Snohomish Health District that when and if, not if, vaccines are approved for the 12 and younger group, that we would start those talks again if the need arises in our school district. We're open to having those conversations.
Thanks, Krista, for all your hard work.
Krista, I had a quick question. So the FDA is looking at approving the Pfizer as not an emergency approval, but as a normal, having completed all of the process, et cetera. Once the FDA does that, is that only for 12 and above, or would it also be approved then at that same time for younger students?
From what I understood with the health department last week, that yes, they were working on that for the younger students, and that they guesstimated a very, very rough guess of, this is very guess, October, end of October. We will see.
For younger students?
For younger students, yes, for below 12. And now They didn't specify on that I have seen on what age that, if that's 0 to 12 or if that is 2 to 12 or 4 to 12. I don't know the answer to that yet.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
If there are no further questions, then thank you, Chris and Krista and everyone else that's helped tonight to keep us updated. We really, really appreciate it. Let's move on to financial overview of the current budget, and that's back to Ms. Gina Zutenhorst.
Unmute. Good evening. I'm Gina Zutenhorst, Executive Director of Financial Services, and this section of our meeting is giving financial highlights of where we are right now in our current budget this year, not next year, this year. So this is as of June where we're at. And I think, can you guys all see my screen? And now I can maximize it full screen, yay. Okay, so we're talking first about the financial health of the district, and I apologize, the board has seen this slide multiple times, but we like to revisit it just to recall the main points of some of the financial challenges that the district is facing this year for 2021. And for the members of our public and any community members or staff persons who are listening, this is an educational time to get a feel for where the budget is for this current year and the financial health of the district. So our school budgets and our staffing are built on full enrollment. However, the enrollment was down by over 500 students. So that created a big challenge for us. Apportionment and other funding was greatly reduced as a result. Transportation ridership as well, greatly reduced, and we have funding that's based on the ridership. Child nutrition services meal counts were greatly reduced, and funding didn't and does not cover the costs fully of operating that full program. And on top of that, we had additional costs for COVID-19 and for remote learning costs affiliated with making that happen in an enriched and viable way. We have some real financial positives, though, lots to be thankful for. We have our capital levy that was approved by voters in February 2020. We have our 4-year educational programs and operations levy, which was approved by the voters at the same time. And this was a really good thing for the district because it really gave us some comfort and stabilization during these times. The state also provided enrollment and transportation stabilization funding. So that helped us in the area of the places where the funding was dependent on enrollment and enrollment didn't come in at the levels it would have needed to sustain the staffings that we were committed to. It wasn't a full, didn't fully bring us back to exactly what we would have had if our enrollment had been what it was planned to be. Nevertheless, it has helped tremendously. Our special education, we have a large safety net award that we have been given notice that we are going to get $480,000 for special to help fund some of the high cost needs of our special education students. And we have federal ESSER funds also on the horizon. We have the ESSER 2 funds of 1.6 million, and we have spent about 300,000 of that on Chromebooks currently, and we are preparing to claim the rest of the funds for that. And then we have ESSER 3 money that we are budgeting into the next fiscal year. So that is creating a healthy fund balance for us ending the year for 2021, and that's going to help sustain future year operations as well. We talked about the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds. The district's going to be using that for a combination of higher staffing and service levels and new costs that are going to be enriching and accelerating and supporting student learning. And it was, again, 1.6 million ESSER 2 and 3.3 for ESSER 3. and talks about which year those will be spent in as well. This slide. I'm certain, so this slide you haven't had highlighted for you before. It is part of each month's budget report in the consent agenda. There's a packet there that gives all this information every month. And then in this portion of the meeting where I'm actually talking to you rather than the consent agenda, I'm highlighting certain pieces and parts. The fund balance for June is 8.3 million. And that fund, and that's this little dot right here, the navy blue line that aligns with June. And that has not been that low at this juncture in the year, June, since 2017-18 fiscal year. So I'm certain that it may seem as if we often say things are looking glum or the sky is falling with regard to finances. But if June is any indicator of the tide really changing, then we should all take note, because June fund balance is the lowest it's been since 2017-18. Now I do, like I just talked about, expect it to be coming back up these next few months, but this is an indicator right here for future years. And you can see these other lines represent other years. The pink, hot pink, bottom line is the 17-18 fiscal year. And that was the onset of McCleary changes. Okay, so I've updated this OSPI financial indicators tool, and it shows improvement. We're now projecting a score to end the fiscal year of 3.35. And a score of 1.75 or lower would put the district on financial warning with OSPI. But again, this assumes we've got less apportionment revenue, more ESSER funds, stabilization funds. We have spent less than we had planned on spending in the budget overall. And it puts the fund balance at an estimated 11.6 million. Here is our adjusted working forecast. This is a revised chart that now has been updated to agree with the budget presentation, as well as just having better known factors altogether. So this aligns with what you saw presented in the earlier part of the public hearing where we were looking at the forecast. Ultimately, what this says is we are going to be down to our minimum fund balance after next year. And this picture assumes reductions in expenditures or increased revenues in the out years, especially if enrollment doesn't recover to pre-COVID levels quickly enough. We'd be looking at reductions 2 years out. We are, for the time being, still ending the year with a strong financial position. So the transfer to transportation vehicle fund that was budgeted and authorized for this year has been done. So that's a good thing. That's for July. So that doesn't actually show in our financial reports to the board yet, but I'm giving notice that that has been done. And we're still waiting for FEMA on the claim that we made to them for $150,000 in COVID costs. We're still waiting for that payment. We believe that will be funded. We just don't know when. And every little bit helps. And we've gone over these COVID related costs, but these are to remember and not to be forgotten, the things that we've had to do differently and pay for in excess of what was initially planned. So for 19-20, we had that technology, hardware, software, and connectivity costs. We had PPE equipment for screening, air quality, and other supplies. We had governor mandated childcare that we expended. We had $428,000 of federal ESSER 1 funds that helped support some of those costs. And then for 2021, we've had about 1.1 million expected COVID related costs. Unemployment insurance was one of those. That was a large dollar amount, but we also had staff resources, increased employee leave benefit costs, PPE, continued costs for PPE and equipment for screening and air quality, and continued costs for software and connectivity. So these gives you the flavor of some of the costs that we have encountered and taken on in order to operate under the new demands that we've faced in 2021. And that is all I have for you today on this section of my presentation. So are there questions?
I have a quick question. Thank you, Gina. Unemployment insurance, are we going to have to keep continuing to pay any of that, or is that going to end soon?
That is all we know that to date that we will need to pay. And in the couple of weeks, I'll be doing a presentation to the board on what the program is going to look like for us going forward and then in the future. But this was a one-time assessment that was done in response to the new landscape that was happening with the economy and the pandemic. So initially they thought it could be up to double that. So they had warned us, and this was back in September of 2020, that this was coming around, and we had to make an unexpected assessment payment for our unemployment insurance. It wasn't necessarily things coming from the actions we had taken as a district, but it was you need to have to pay into the insurance premium here. So it was $318,000, and it could have been more. It could have been double that. But since then, things have levelized, and we haven't had to make that other half of the assessment. But I will be sharing more of what our investment is and our costs related to our actual hard costs. You know, what have they had to pay out on our behalf for unemployment insurance claims, et cetera, in a future year meeting or a future meeting, because that's part of board policy that we review that program each year. Good news, though, is that we don't have to pay another $318,000.
All right, Gina, if there are no further questions, we're going to have you stick with us. You are still here because you are the next item, item C, Resolution 2110, referencing the 2021-2022 Arlington School District, District number 16 annual budget. And
Yes.
Gina.
Yes. I'm going to pull open the resolution. Is that, Julie, do you need me to pull that up? Because I can. Or are you going to do it?
Yes. You were grabbing it, Gina.
Okay. Here it comes. Okay, thank you. So you have before you resolution number 2110, the 21-22 Arlington School District number 16 annual budget. And contained within this is the authority for next year's budget. And if we scroll down, it will take you to the part where it actually has the dollar amounts and the transfer amounts for each fund. And so those are listed. This agrees to the detail of what we spoke about in the presentation that we heard in the public hearing. In addition, attached to this board plate is the F-195 document, the over 200-page document, and the F-195F, which is the 4-year summary for revenues, expenditures, and enrollment. And those were also summarized in the budget presentation public hearing portion of the meeting. Those documents are attached to the board plate along with this budget resolution. This budget resolution also includes transportation vehicle fund, the transfer, where it says line F, G, and H. Operating transfers are embodied in the budget resolution. And going further down, it also talks about those budget transfers and gives the Executive Director of Financial Services, myself, authority to make those transfers to the County Treasurer. And it also lists the amounts that we are going to be levying for 2022 tax rolls. So the County Treasurer will utilize this board resolution as well as the authority to go ahead and put these dollar amounts on the tax rolls for 2022. And it lists the amount for general fund and it lists the amount for capital projects. And those were also part of the public hearing presentation. And these amounts are also contained in the F-195. So with that, I would like to propose for board consideration of approval or answer questions or next step.
Thank you again for your very, very thoroughness, Gina. And I'm going to call for any other questions from the board. And if not, then may I have a motion to adopt the budget resolution 2110 concerning 2021-2022 Arlington School District number 16 annual budget.
I make a motion that we approve the resolution 2110 for 21-22 Arlington School District number 16 annual budget.
Okay.
And a second?
I'll second.
I agree. I'll second that.
Thank you. All right, we've had a motion made and seconded to adopt budget resolution 2110 for the 2021-2022 Arlington School District 16 annual budget. Madam Secretary, could you call roll?
Director Kelly?
Aye.
Director Levesque?
Aye.
Director Ray?
Aye.
Director Rawson?
Aye.
President Fay?
Aye. And moving right along, and we're going to continue with Gina and talk about authorization of impressed accounts and change funds.
All right, so thank you. This one is another resolution proposal. And so I look forward to talking to you about these as Julie and Debbie work their way to their magic of opening up the actual resolution. And here it comes. So this is an annual authorization resolution that is proposed for board consideration to approve each year. This is something that we do as an internal control point over the accounts that we hold outside of the county treasurer's office. And this is required by the state accounting manual that we bring this to the board, that they establish those amounts, any changes to those amounts, and the maximum amounts that are allowed to be in those accounts on a routine basis. So usually these are just simple operating accounts that are for like impressed checking accounts. And so we have made one change to what is in the list. We've actually requested to close the Arlington District Office ASB Elementary Impressed account. It was a balance of 3,000 and we're going to close that out to zero upon resolution approval if it's approved. But that's because it hasn't been used in multiple years. They haven't needed to use the impressed account. That means that's also because of other methods that they're able to utilize to spend. So procurement card is one. It doesn't, closing the impressed account doesn't mean that don't have funds to do what they need to do, but it hasn't needed to be through the impressed account for multiple years in a row. So we propose to keep that account open and incur fees for that. So anyway, this is the list, and I can answer any questions that anybody has about this.
What kind of access do people have to the P cards? from a purchasing perspective for classroom expenditures?
That's not really, that's separate from this, really.
I understand it. We're getting rid of petty cash at the elementary level, and instead we're saying you can use your P card instead. I'm just asking what the access to the P cards is.
They go through their fiscal secretary at the office for P card use at the elementary.
Okay, thank you.
I think they are able to check the card out. They aren't assigned to teachers at the elementary school level, but they have access to using it through their fiscal secretary.
Any further questions? If not, then may I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2111, authorization of impressed accounts and change funds?
I can make a motion. We authorize Resolution 2111.
And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. A motion has been made and seconded to adopt Resolution 2111, authorization of impressed accounts and change funds. Madam Secretary, could you call for a vote?
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Levac,
Aye.
Director Ray,
Aye.
Director Rawson,
Aye.
President Fay.
Aye, thank you. And now we'll move on to our next resolution, 2112, which is Parent-Teacher Conference Days Waiver for the 21-22 school year. And that goes to Dr. Sweeting.
Yes, this is a resolution that is required as part of the process to notify OSPI that we would like to have 3 days at the beginning of this school year, full days for parent-teacher conferences. Last year, we had a phase-in of the start of the year, and we had conferences for elementary students, and it went well. And so with our academic and student well-being plan, it's essential that we connect with our families right away at the very beginning of the school year and make connections, talk about what are the academic and social emotional needs. So this is the components that are in this resolution are the ones that OSPI requires. They require us to identify how many days. It also that will meet the instructional hours requirement, which we will. And so this is something that if the board so approves or when they approve, I will notify OSPI. And part of this is that they need to be notified 30 days before this is implemented, and we're really close to that line in the sand. So tomorrow would be the 30th day. So we're really close.
Is this all via Zoom? Is this 3 days worth of parent conferences?
No, we're going to. Actually, we're going to do what we can in person following the protocols, the distancing and the facial coverings, because like this week, there's Eagle Days, and we're just, we're trying to make sure that people are not with each other for more than 15 minutes. We're going to try to do the things that we need to do to keep people safe. So my understanding is that they would be in person, but I would suspect if a Zoom option for some families that do not want to come in person, that could be, we're getting great at setting up Zoom meetings. So I'm sure that could happen.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, then could I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2112, Parent-Teacher Conference Days Waiver for 2021-2022?
I can make a
I'll make
motion to adopt Resolution
2112,
2112.
Parent-Teacher Conference Days Waiver for 21-22.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, it's been motioned and seconded to adopt Resolution 2112, Parent-Teacher Conference Days Waiver for the 2021-2022 school year. Madam Secretary.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Levac,
Aye.
Director Ray,
Aye.
Director Rawson,
Aye.
President Fay.
Aye, thank you. We move on to item F, 2021-22 student calendar, and that goes to Eric Young.
And actually, I'm going to Step in for Eric, but I need to share my screen. And Eric, you're welcome to say some things too, if you'd like. But I'm going to share, and maybe Eric, you could stand by when maybe there's a question. I put together a presentation to share about the change in approach to the calendar this year. And so the board has the calendar in the board packet, and it's kind of complicated. It's, there's color on it, and it shows early dismissal days, and it shows conference days, and it has all of that on there. And so this year, thank you for approving the resolution. The first 3 days for elementary will be full day parent-teacher conferences. There are on the calendar 2 types of early dismissals. Can be confusing. There in the purple there, it says mid-year conferences, the day before Thanksgiving, and the last day of school are 3-hour early dismissals. So those are identified with a different color. We're proposing a weekly Thursday early dismissal, but that is 1 hour and 15 minutes. And I would love to have it to be a little bit more, but part of this requirement is that we need to meet the instructional hours that are basic ed instructional hours and minutes. So the hour and 15 minutes we still have a little bit more room, but it gives us, it puts us at a spot where we know that we're meeting that requirement. So 2 types of early dismissals. Here's the statement about basic education minimum instructional hours, that we must meet the required instructional hours and provide 180 days of instruction unless we get a waiver for the days, and we're not asking for a waiver for the days. And the district calculation for compliance on this may be made. There are different ways, but one of the ways that we've been using is that it's a district-wide annual average of at least 1,027 instructional hours over grades 1-2. And you can't count lunches. You can count conference time. You can count some passing time within reason, but you cannot count the lunch times. So just we have to make sure that we comply with this. And there'll be actually on the board meeting in September, there'll be a request to approve the basic minute or the basic hours for this year. The background for early dismissals, this started several years ago in the Advisory Council for Education, the ACE committee, where we studied this. There was interest in the group, and the committee actually is comprised of students, parents, teachers, and administrators, and community business organizations as well, and higher education. So we studied this. And then after studying it for a few years, in June of 2019, we did it during our annual report to the board. We recommended to the board that the board would seriously consider implementing early dismissals, and there were some other recommendations as well, but early dismissal or late arrival, we didn't identify which one during that time. The board approved that to study it further. So last fall, there was a study group that was organized. However, it didn't have much momentum because COVID happened, not last year, but the year before. During this last year, the interest, especially the ACE committee again, where is this going? And just the ask, we did some surveys. And so I'm going to share with you the results of the surveys that we did. We did staff, we did administrators, and we did parents. So I'm going to share a little bit about that. So when you're thinking of early dismissals, here are the potential early dismissal days when you don't count like the first week and last week. So if we select Monday, it's a total of 33 days. If you select Tuesdays, it's 36. Wednesdays is 34, Thursdays 33, and Fridays 34. The why this is important is that we're still, even though we want to do these early dismissals to support our staff to come together and to do the work that they need to do, we also need to guard that instructional time. So just there are the number of days for each day of the week. So feedback. So staff survey, we had 436 responses from the staff survey. And this was a staff survey that was given towards the end, I think it was last week of school, but these questions were embedded with other questions about how did the school year went. I mean, it wasn't just about the school schedule. So for this particular question and asking, would you support an adjusted school schedule to allow for a later arrival or early dismissal on a certain day of the week for professional development training and more? 433 responded, saying 71.6% said yes. And then there you can see there the no's and then the not sure, not certain. The next question, if you support having an adjusted school schedule 1 day per week, what do you prefer? Later arrival, early dismissal? And you can see overwhelmingly that 68.8% said early dismissal. We did not ask on any of these surveys which day of the week, but then there were some in the comments mentioning of the day, but we really wanted to know if people, the concept, and then as a district, we wanted to determine which day that we felt would be the best for the early dismissals. Comments, there were a lot of comments, and this is just a few ideas from those comments. But for this particular item, for the comments on the staff survey were related more towards COVID and what are the needs as we move forward. But the comments related to the schedule change, there were basically only a few comments saying, very exciting idea. Yes, we need time. Only one mentioned a day, and it was Friday for the early dismissal. And several mentioned that that because they had time last year on Fridays to do some of that work, that it was helpful. They mentioned how that was helpful. So the district administrator survey, there was 20 responses asking if they're in favor. It's not quite as overwhelming as what the staff was, but 50%, so it's more for the yes than it was for the no. Would you prefer early dismissal or late start? Not quite as overwhelming, but early dismissal was the one selected, the most selected. The comments from administrators, pair it with a day that can be extended with PLC time. So there are, for example, some schools have already identified days where they meet after school for PLC. So if you attach that and connect it to already a day that has extended time before it, that makes a great opportunity to have an extension of that early dismissal and PLC time. And then a few mentioned not on Friday, but then a few mentioned have on Monday or Friday. So it was divided there. Parent survey, we had over 900 responses. And when we asked if we should replace the current half-day schedules that we have, throughout the year with either a late arrival or early dismissal, 58.5% said yes, and 28.3% said no. And then, of course, there's some that weren't sure. What they prefer, 54.6% early dismissal, and then you can see that less for late arrival. So the good news is among staff, administrators, and families, the early dismissal was the one. And I will tell you another thing, even though late arrival has its advantages too, one of the things that's for the system, it would be difficult for us to do transportation for a late arrival. So it's easier and better for transportation to do in early dismissal. Some of the comments from parents, there were 40 parents that mentioned Friday would be best. There were 4 parents and we didn't ask the question which day. So these were offered in the comment section this is what they mentioned. 4 mentioned Monday, 3 mentioned Wednesday, 2 mentioned not on a Monday or Friday, and 28 said specifically it'll be hard for their working schedule or for daycare. And then 16 said, please make it whatever it is, I don't care, just make it consistent. And then 10 said, great idea. So why Thursday? So one of the things that, the other districts surrounding us, Some of them do early dismissal, some do late arrival, some do Mondays, some do Wednesdays, some do Fridays. So why Thursday? Well, I guess we'd be the only one, as far as I know, that would be doing it on Thursdays. It would provide extended time for PLC time. So if we did it on Friday, it would be less likely that we would connect it to a PLC time on a Friday, because people would be, I mean, they'd just be harder to do that. And then we could do it on Wednesday, and that was still an option, but the district leadership team has been traditionally on Wednesdays in the afternoon. So we kind of left that Wednesday out. It does keep the number of days at 33 versus 34 or 36. Could we do it with 34? Yes, I wouldn't want to do Tuesdays because of the number of days. 36 would be pretty, it nudges. Right now, when I do the calculations, the result of the 33 days, it results in our average instructional hours at 1,040, which is above, the 1,027. But that's a comfortable place to be. If we were to add another day, let's say, we would still be within the 1,027. We'd be closer to the 1,027, but we would still make it. We would still be within that guideline. Well, I guess I stopped it. I guess that was the end of my presentation. I think my last one was a question. What questions do you have? But so, I've been asked by some, why Thursday? It's just, I had shared that we were trying to stay away from Mondays or Fridays. Mondays is the beginning of the week, and it just made sense to have it later in the week. Fridays I think it'd be better for some parents. You could see 40 parents out of the 900 mentioned it, but it also doesn't allow for any extension of time, for the staff. So there it is. That's what the calendar is. The good news is, we're moving forward with an opportunity for our staff to have, some time, and for our district to have time for more consistent time for this kind of work. So what question?
My first question was around the total. So 33 days and an hour and 15 minutes. That's about 41.25 total hours of time. Is that more or less than we had previously when we were taking the half day and service days and all of the other time that we had previously on calendars? Are we adding more time, or is it just taking the same amount of time we had and kind of peanut butter spreading it out?
No, it's adding more time. Before, the half days that we had before was about 21 hours.
About 21
so we've
hours.
almost
Okay.
doubled it. Almost
Excellent.
doubled it.
Okay, that's very good. And then I guess the other question I had was, the parents who had questions for daycare, et cetera, have we checked with Boys and Girls Club and the other kinds of places that people go that they can accommodate, having students show up an hour and 15 minutes earlier than they normally would on Thursdays, so that we've got kind of community support for having a consistent early dismissal on Thursdays?
Yes, and Gary Sable also has a communication campaign with all of the early learner providers, too, as far as the daycares, and with the Y, and with the Boys and Girls Club. And for them, we're only doing it one day a week. So it's not like they have to have, extra students every day, an hour and 15 minutes. And really, it's an hour and 15 minutes rather than 3 hours. So that's a good thing.
I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, I'd like to refer to some of the questions that have come from other staff and community. And one was the learning loss on Fridays versus the learning loss on Thursdays. Typically, it is true that on Fridays, that's when parents will pull their kids out. If they're going to go on a 3-day vacation, if they're going to go to a sports event, Friday is the day that typically they'll pull those kids out early. So in terms of learning loss, that would be the best day, so that we aren't losing that learning time on Thursday and Friday for those kiddos that depart early. just looking around the people that I know in jobs, Fridays tend to be more flexible in terms of companies being more flexible and allowing their staff to take more downtime on those Fridays. And I don't understand, help me understand the PLC thing. From what I understand, the PLC time is on Thursdays, and that's why you wanted Thursday to tie. I don't understand that connection.
No, I think, for example, I think right now Arlington High School has had their PLC time on Tuesdays. And one of the concepts mentioned to me is if we were to put the early dismissal on a day that either that day or a day that could potentially they could have their PLCs, it just gives more time for the staff to stay. Because some staff, this does not replace staff meetings or the PLC time. So we're just trying to maximize the time that they're together. And, you get started on something and then it's nice to just keep moving forward. So I think that's the advantage. I'm torn with I've read some of the thoughts too about there are students that they leave on Fridays. Not that I want to endorse that, or reinforce that, because I want them to stay, in school every day. And maybe we could, if the board does approve the Thursday, then maybe the calendar with Thursday on there, then maybe people change their behavior and they move it to do on Thursdays. I don't know. I'm looking at it from a learning opportunity also for our staff, and for that, just, this is new for us. We're just trying to, and yes, nobody does Thursday, but there are plenty of districts that do Monday or Wednesday, and the few that do Friday. So I hear the concerns. We've had some great teachers that have sent us some thoughts, in the last couple of days about how there are some students, not every student takes Friday off, but there are some, that do that. So I welcome the board's thoughts on that.
I think the other comment that struck me also, Chris, was that in terms of a teacher, typically you will end lessons at the end of the week on Friday. You'll end up your unit or your theme or whatever you're working on. Friday's typically your ending day. And one of the comments from one of our staff was that Friday would be better because then the lesson or the unit or the theme or whatever would be done over, and that time could be used for scoring and lesson planning for the following week. And I thought that was a strong reason for Fridays also.
But that's why I would like Thursday. That's why Thursday was selected versus Tuesday or a Monday, because you could you do that planning on Thursday, and you're still going to have to need to put things together. Because think of Fridays. I don't know, Fridays. I don't know. I guess it'd be nice to survey some of the other districts that do this work on Fridays, to see what happens there. And I would say that we've got a dual interest here. We're wanting to serve the needs of our families, because it's going to be hard. This is an every week, early dismissal. So what will be better for our families, but also then because we're doing this, I want to make sure that it's the best for our staff as well. So it's kind of this, what's the best? I really do feel that later in the week is better than earlier in the week, for sure. That I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah, I do too. Absolutely. But I would go with the comments that we've had, and because they make perfect sense to me. Could we switch the PLC time to Fridays? Could staff do that so that you could tie that PLC time to your early release time?
Well, I wouldn't want to, that's more autonomous for those schools to decide that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't dictate that to them.
Absolutely.
And I doubt that they would, I don't know. I don't want to speak for them, but that might be challenging to do that. I don't know. We'll see.
Can I weigh in a little bit? I've gotten a few comments from people too that they would prefer Fridays. When I first saw the schedule and I saw the Thursdays, I was like, why Thursdays? That seems like a weird day to pick a Thursday. Like, that's not what I would want. As a parent, as a mom, my kids, they're tired at the end of the week. Fridays are dragging. I think Fridays make sense to me. And if this is one thing that we could make people happy with, we've made people miserable for so many months and people are so unhappy. If we could just give them one happy little token of gratitude and appreciation and say, here, we heard you, we listened, we can give you this one thing. This one thing is one doable thing. If we could just give them what they want and give everybody Fridays a half, just a little compromise and say, we hear you. We totally can make one thing happen for you. Sorry about everything else, but Fridays, that would make me so happy.
I hear you, Mary. Greg, I think when 40 parents did make comment, even though it wasn't asked, that does stand out. So, and the good news is the Friday is only one day in addition. It's one additional day. I do want to guard, the number of days because we have to be very careful on that.
Also thinking about like sports events and like football games, and it's just Fridays are fun days. There's a lot to stay in town for on Fridays. I don't think we'll have that many people to see.
So, good time to comment?
Yes.
I'm a little delayed. Good. Okay. I just don't want to stop over, but a little delayed on the phone here. Sorry about that. Yeah, while I hear that there were some vocal folks who said they would prefer Fridays for various reasons, I'm not sure that really aligns with our need for the educational responsibilities of the students in providing, Fridays as an early dismissal day there. So while there certainly were some that voiced that, I mean, there's, clearly no consensus or, we certainly didn't ask the 5,400 plus students and their parents and families and have a real one. So centering on that by a few that were vocal, I guess I'm hesitant to do that. I would much rather approve the calendar as proposed on Thursdays. I'm sure that Dr. Sweeting and her cabinet had many discussions on what days were appropriate and what days they felt would be best overall for the students, the staff, and the families. And they didn't, randomly choose Thursday. They chose it for some particular reason. So I would certainly be in support of continuing the proposal as Dr. Sweeting made on the calendar to have Thursdays and no changes there.
Are there any other comments? Well, I would like to move that the 2021-2022 Arlington Public Schools student calendar change early release days to Fridays rather than Thursdays. Thank you. So it's been moved and it's been motioned and seconded to switch the early release days on the Arlington Public School calendar from Thursdays to Fridays. And now we could have a discussion about that motion. And I was the first one to make that motion, so I would, I can't remember the rules, but I think I'm supposed to speak first, but I think I've said everything I need to say. So if anyone else would like to speak, please do so.
Maybe we could hear from our student advisors.
Oh, thank you. Yes, please. Maddie.
Yeah, I was just gonna pop in before and actually agree with Mike about keeping it on the Thursdays, even though it's kind of like odd and that wouldn't typically be on a Friday. Early release would be. I feel like on a Thursday it might give those students an extra little boost, like, oh, come on, we can just do, you just got that one more day and then you have the weekend. So I personally like Thursdays, but I can also see the benefit of both Fridays as well, especially with sports and football games. And usually games are on Fridays, but at the same time, when we aren't in football season, there's basketball games on Thursdays and Fridays. So it kind of goes both ways. Honestly, I think it just comes down to personal preference when you're looking at it all. But I personally like the Thursdays because it does give you that like extra little boost. Come on, you can do it one more day type thing.
Thanks, Maddie. Kyle, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I think that the big thing would be that it's there, not necessarily on the specific day. However, I do think that having it on Friday would have a little bit of a benefit because you have a bit more of a uniform week leading up to it. There's not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are all the same, and then Thursday is different. Then we go back to the previous schedule on Friday. I think that keeping the first 4 days as a uniform schedule at the same time for each day would benefit more.
Thank you, Kyle.
Judy, my comment would be just the fact that we've had this discussion before, and we asked Dwayne, what's a typical outage on a Friday? All right, it's at 10%. So there's 160 kids out on Fridays already. And so from my perspective, with those kind of basis numbers of who's already out on Fridays, we want to maximize our student seat time. And so if we do it on Thursdays, we are not going to do that. So by putting it on Thursday afternoons, those 160 that are already gone anyway are now just missing less time. So that hour and a half is preserved for our teachers to meet and collaborate. And essentially, if you add up the total number of hours of missed education time because of our existing numbers with absenteeism on Friday, we actually end up teaching more hours by choosing Friday over Thursday. So I would support doing Friday simply because it's just more teaching hours delivered to the students because of our existing numbers. Basically, you can go back and pull the attendance numbers at any school to the last, pre-COVID year, and you'll see all of those numbers would tell you that Fridays is a day when we have less students there.
Any other comments from board members?
So Judy, it's Mike Ray. I'll speak against the motion as previously stated. I feel that Thursdays, as proposed by Dr. Sweeting or staff, will be the best days.
All right, thank you. All right.
Can I just clarify real quick? So Mark, just if we could dovetail on your insight. So you were saying that absenteeism in the district is highest on Fridays, and if you're going to make it a half day, you're saying it would make sense to, or not a half day, but if you're having an early release day, Fridays made the most of that since you're already missing some students. Is that
correct?
Okay.
Exactly. So since students are already taking off to leave early, go with their parents over a weekend, whatever it may be, our absenteeism is the highest on Friday. So if you were to just do the math, total number of student hours, most of our student hours are missing on Fridays, not Mondays, not Tuesdays, not Wednesdays, not Thursdays. Fridays is the biggest day. So if you're going to impact teaching time and you're going to cut out teaching time to the students and add collaboration time, doing it when you have less students makes most sense to me.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Thank you.
And President Fay, I also could invite Eric DeYoung. He could speak from also maybe taking a look at it from the angle of our staff and absenteeism on Fridays. So I got to see if he's on.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I'm here. So just, Mark, your comment about student attendance on Fridays being the lowest, it's also the lowest for our staff as well. That's the day when with more staff out than any other day of the week for a variety of reasons, sick leave, personal leave, etc. And so if this is a professional development day, if the majority or the most staff are going to be out on those days, then conducting professional development is a difficult challenge if you have staff out as well. I understand the student component, but the reason we're doing early releases is for staff professional development. And so if staff are not there, or not there in higher numbers than another day, it's going to be.
I totally agree with you, Eric, and I think it's just a balancing act, and I think that the value that we get out of the collaboration is fabulous, but the value we get out of teacher time with students is more. So it's not a matter of gee whiz, which one is, they're both hard choices to make. I agree with you. We will have not as much participation with staff on Fridays, but the fact is we'll spend more time with students, and more time with students will be more valuable than for the teachers who choose to take a sick day on a Friday and miss out on their valuable professional development.
Another quick question. Are these early release Fridays, I'd forgotten the calendar, are they every Friday, or is it, what did the calendar propose? It would be every week?
They're pretty much, but not the first week of school. I mean, there's a couple of Fridays that they're not. So.
Okay, but essentially we're counting on every week this is happening, an hour and a half. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other comments? All right, then we have a motion before the board. And the motion states that the Arlington School District calendar would change the early release days from Friday to Thursdays for the 2021-2022 school year. Madam Secretary, could we have a vote?
Judy, can you restate that motion? I think it was maybe said backwards or a piece of it.
I think so too.
Okay, so let's give it a try. I'll try it again. I would like to make a motion that the 2021-2022 Arlington School District calendar change early release days to Fridays rather than Thursdays.
Director Kelly?
Do we need to second that motion, or are we just going right to?
She actually already made the motion earlier. She was just
restating it. I will say aye.
Director Levesque?
Aye.
Director Ray?
Director Ray is a hard nay. No for Director Ray.
Thank you. Director Rawson?
Aye.
And President Fay?
Aye. Thank you. And then Dr. Sweeting, are you going to make that change on the, the next thing we need to do is make a motion now to pass the the student calendar with the new adjustment. Are you good with that tonight?
Yeah, that's fine. I actually have to submit with this notification to OSPI, like after this meeting, the calendar.
Okay. So. All right. So then let's go. Then what we will need right now is a motion to adopt the revised 2021-2022 student calendar for the next coming year. Do I have a motion for that?
I make a motion for the adopted change to the 2021-22 student calendar.
And a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been motioned and seconded to approve the 2021-2022 student calendar with the change to early release days on Fridays rather than Thursdays.
President Fay, may I make one note? I wanted to share that on the total calendar on June 20th, that most likely we have it slated as a snow day, but because the new holiday, the Juneteenth, I believe that the 20th will be that holiday. So that'll nudge, I mean, if we have to have a snow day, it's going to nudge the snow days to the 24th, leaving the 20th, I believe.
Okay.
So just.
Do we need to make a motion?
That.
Do we need to make another clarification for that, or has that already been?
Julie, I'm going to defer to you how we should do this the right way.
I think if the motion stated that the board adopts the revised calendar with the additional revision of allowing for Juneteenth, we're okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, then we're good with that, Madam Secretary.
Whoa, discussion, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I would like to speak against the motion, as I am not in favor of Fridays as an early release day. I think it was a poor decision made by the remainder of the board based upon inadequate and insufficient information.
Okay. Julie, do you have that?
Yeah, I think we're fine. It's just discussion at this point.
Okay. Okay, is there any other discussion? Then we have approved the 2021-2022 student calendar.
I think we
No,
still
we have
need
to vote on it.
Have to
do we not?
vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. We've already motioned and we've already seconded that. So now, Madam Secretary, could you call for a vote?
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Lebec,
Aye.
Director Ray,
Director Ray is no.
Director Rawson,
Aye.
and President Fay.
Aye. Thank you. And thank you so much, Julie, for always helping us figure out proper procedures. From there, we'll go on to item G, first reading of board policies. And the first one is 1400, and that goes to Dr. Sweeting.
So as a result of moving our regular board meetings to the BPAC, we needed to change this policy. The first paragraph states that beginning with the first board meeting in September, regular board meeting will be held at 6 p.m. in the Burns Performing Arts Center. So it just lists the address, and that's where we would have the regular board meetings. And so everything that's been changed here is making note of that. So the next paragraph just changes the administration building boardroom to the BPAC. We also added the statement that board meetings will also continue to be live streamed and recorded and available on the district's YouTube channel. So we added that statement. And I think on the very last page, it has a statement here that the board will not require people to sign in unless it's required or recommended by the health officials in response to COVID-19, although that's different if they're going to make public comment. And so there you go. That's it. So this is really in response to moving our regular board meetings to be in person at the Burns Performing Arts Center to allow for spacing. So this is first reading, and we'll have a second reading at the next board meeting.
I have a little question.
Yes.
That little thing. Are we still going to have it? I know we're going to still have it on the YouTube channel. Is it still going to be in a Zoom format for people who want to speak up, but want to do it from their own comfort of their own home on Zoom? Or is it going to be just in person and just on YouTube? I just wanted to clarify.
So Julie, I might need your help here, but I believe that it's going to be I think that we are still going to have a Zoom link. Is that correct, Julie?
Yes, Mary, at this time, it's still legally required that we keep the virtual option available.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to double check.
Yeah. And I'm sure that the first couple times we will have some things to work out, just to work out. For example, if a board member if for some reason they can only attend remotely, so how do we display that person, remotely? Is it on the back screen or is it we're just not sure. So we're going to be working on some of those logistics.
If there are no further questions, we'll move on to first reading of board policies 6230, 6570, and 6571. And that's to Gina.
Sorry, hello. I'm trying to get my computer running back up. All right, so which one is first? 6230. Yes. This is being revised to, based on WASDA's recommendation, to include a piece about third-party receipting for online fundraising and our ticket sales. And it's just to make sure that it's acknowledged in board policy that if we do so, that we are compliant with the state auditor's guidance for third-party receipting when we do that. So there are some very particular things involved with that, and it sometimes vendor business models don't always comply with that. So we need to be careful when we do enter into anything that we make sure that they're doing it according to the state auditor's guidance. Any questions?
Kina, would that include what the Booster Club does for memberships?
No, because the Booster Club's entering into their own agreements with how they do business.
Okay, so our 33% discount on tickets is not influenced by this policy.
No, this is talking about like, so if we have a receipting software system with online payments, then we need to have an agreement with whoever that online payment processor is, that those funds are remitted to us within 24 hours and that they only use banks that are on the approved public depository list, doing business in the state of Washington, et cetera.
So is this
So there's some real
affecting
particulars.
RevTrak?
RevTrak, we have, yeah, an agreement already.
So RevTrak continues to be viable under this policy change?
Oh yeah, it's not a policy change as so much as it is an acknowledgement in board policy that you will, that we must. We've been working in this realm of third-party receipting agreements and making sure it's compliant with what they've been recommending for years, multiple years. So we're well aware of what those requirements are, and we've been preaching those requirements with any type of proposal in the third-party receipting realm.
Got it. All right, thank you.
Thanks. The next one is 6570. And this is a combination of the next policy is one that's being deleted, and it's because the data that was in that is now being included here in the property and data management policy. So you can see what the information is there. And I'll happy to entertain any questions. Okay, and that was the first reading. So then the other policy 6571 is in regards to a policy that they are asking to be deleted because, like I said, just before they have included that data in the other policy that you were just looking at.
Thank you, Gina, for and thank you, Chris, for the first reading of those board policies. And we'll look forward to the second reading on those next time. With that, that ends the new business for tonight, and we'll move on to informational items and begin with the superintendent's report.
Good evening again. I wanted to share that this week our district leaders will be together, as I mentioned, for 2 days on Wednesday and Thursday. And for the second day, we will actually be joined by guests from the Stillaguamish tribe from their education department. So it'll be pretty exciting. There are 5 of them that are going to join us, and we're going to talk about our partnership and curriculum work together. Also this week that's happening, I know that Eagle Days are taking place at Arlington High School on the 12th and 13th. We are also planning for and sending out a notification soon, save the date, the district days, it'll be on Zoom, not in person. So the district day Zoom kickoff is September 1st, 8:30 to 11:30. That'll be on Zoom. And we also have some special guests as well from the Stillaguamish tribe that are going to be with us for that morning. I also wanted to share that Mark Earhart is submitting an application for, it's to the Emergency Connectivity Fund, Connect K-12. It's for, there's $7.2 billion in ed tech funding that is available. And Mark is submitting an application for 1,750 Chromebooks for students, and then 300 laptops for teachers, staff. So that's exciting. That application is due this week. And then I also wanted to mention to the board that in the past, I have scheduled kind of one-on-one meetings in person with you, but I would like to increase the connection with you. So I am putting on the calendar weekly check-in phone calls with each of you, just to check base. So Debbie Montgomery will make that happen. So when you see that come from her, it's because I want to have individual one-on-one weekly check-ins with each board member. And that's what I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next we'll move to legislative update and discussion, and that goes to Mr. Mark Rawson.
Nothing really too much to report. The legislative conference is in, I believe, November of this year. It will be face-to-face, and there'll be a great opportunity to collaborate with other districts. I'd highly recommend, I will not be part of it, unfortunately, because I'm not running, but I would highly recommend that you get together with a peer group on the 39th. I'm more than happy to set up those meetings at the legislative conference, at the WASDA conference, so that you could kind of have an informal meeting with the 39th and the other school board members. Some boards will be, fairly new. There's some boards that are in our group that have had quite a few board members swap out. But it'll be a great opportunity for the students and for the new board members for Arlington's board to meet up with the other boards that are all share our senator and our 2 representatives. So I will try to coordinate that with the other boards and set up a time that works for everybody at the conference before I go.
Thank you, Mark. Any other comments from board members?
I just want to say, can I say to Carrie Helgeson, I don't know how to say her name, welcome home. It's great to have you back. And for Kyle, thanks for speaking up and joining our board. I'm really excited to work with you. I love hearing student voices. This weekend, I took my kids camping. We got a little bit wet in the rain on Saturday, but it was refreshing to get back to the basics. And I'm looking forward to having the kids get back to school and focus on the basics, and really enjoying the good conversation with the board tonight. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more, Mary.
I just wanted to share that I finished up my 5 weeks with the school in Mount Vernon. Well, it's a nonprofit, but anyway, it was very good. And despite the fact that we were all masked up, I thought it was a great opportunity for the kids to come together. And I was very impressed and delighted to see first graders enjoying the company of each other, because aside from reading and math skills, and I'm just sitting there like, oh my goodness, what's the fall going to look like? I just was very happy that that we provided an environment for them to be together. And for 5 weeks, they just had a blast. So I'm happy I had that experience, and I'm glad they're going to go into school in about a month. And I think they feel better having done that for the summer.
I wanted to say also thank you to Kyle and Maddie. Thank you so much for just being on the board, and we love that you're there so that we can hear your comments, and it's so valuable for us to learn from you. So other than that, any other board members? We're good? Okay. Then I'd like to just announce that our next board meeting will be on August 23rd. And I need a motion. I'd like to have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been motioned and seconded to adjourn tonight's meeting. Madam Secretary?
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Levesque,
Aye.
Director Ray,
Aye.
Director Rousen,
Aye.
President Fay.
Aye. Good night.